Hey folks, it's Mike Reynolds on May 8th, talking to you from Ability, Maine. This is another edition of Ability, Maine's Disability Rights Storytime, where we talk about disability issues that are upcoming in the news. Sometimes talk about disability history, sometimes talk about upcoming things, and we're going to be talking about some really historic stuff today. That happened within the past 2 weeks. And if you can't catch us live, catch us. We have been putting these on line on YouTube, and we're going to link them to, you can get them via YouTube if you search Ability Maine. We have the last 2.5, 3 years online, and we've taken breaks because I've had a number of issues this year, and luckily I've been able to overcome a lot of them, and so today we're going to try and talk about a bunch of things that are going to be happening. First of all, after 4/20 of last year, a few weeks ago, 18 days ago, so almost 3 weeks ago, Monday, there was, on the 23rd, Department of Justice formally rescheduled marijuana to Schedule 3, so it's no longer in the same schedule as, it's no longer a Schedule 1 drug. At least that's medical marijuana grown in state controlled facilities is no longer considered a Schedule 1 drug. It's considered a Schedule 3 drug. All other forms of cannabis are still considered Schedule 3. As of the 28th, that means that there's a 60-day window that people can register with the Drug Enforcement Agency and get some sort of federal license. It doesn't seem to be really strong about what it actually does, other than you have to apply for a federal license with DEA. It does allow medical marijuana growers in states that allow it, and growers that are following state guidelines to immediately access the federal tax 280E provision, which has been wanted for a while. It's basically allows access to banking, and it has been a problem for caregivers, especially in Maine, because nobody wants to take money from medical marijuana because the banking industry has decided that it's too dangerous and it's part of it's subject to money laundering and all sorts of stuff. And in Maine, we have illegal Chinese grows that may or may not be legal, but shouldn't be happening. They may or may not be abusing the spirit of the medical marijuana law in Maine, which has been going on since 1999, and hopefully that will be changing with this. The problem with this is that no one knows. They're saying it's going to take about 6 months to do the things. They're going to try and fast track it as much as possible, and they're going to do what they can to get it, make it easier for people to do this. The other main date that is being talked about is that on June 29th, a lot of places are reporting that there's going to be a second meeting for all other forms of cannabis which is a lot, which is recreational weed, Delta 8, stuff that's been approved by the Farm Bill in 2018. On June 29th, all bills are going to be discussed in a meeting by department, by the DEA or DOJ, I'm trying to think. So I guess the hearing will be probably by the DEA. So 629 will be helpful because if you use recreational marijuana, because a lot of people with PTSD who are veterans can't become patients in certain states. In Maine, we can use both. Although in Maine, the recreational market is got a 20% tax on it, so it makes it a little bit prohibitive compared to medical marijuana. And as one of the first people that literally smoked medical marijuana legally in the state, I'm not against recreational weed. I bought recreational weed. It's really good, but it's pricey. A lot of places will give you a discount if you're a medical patient. But, and I think people need to realize that medical marijuana and recreational marijuana and DA and all this marijuana stuff needs to be taxed and regulated like alcohol, and should be, all of these providers should have access to the tax incentives in 280E. So I would hope that with this, on the 29th, all forms of cannabis are moved to Schedule 3, because there really is no reason to have any dangerous form of cannabis. There are no real dangerous forms of cannabis. There's certainly more dangerous doses of cannabis. I mean, I wouldn't give myself a 100-gram edible dose. I'm not sure I would do dabs all, concentrates all night. But I mean, at some point I probably did, and I enjoyed it. It was okay. But I probably can't handle that now, and I've been using cannabis for so long that I really don't use much compared to what a lot of people use. And I do smoke, and it's useful, and it does help with my spasms, and it has for the last, almost 20 years. Easily 20 years I've been smoking daily. And so it's just finally a point where medical marijuana and the federal government is almost catching up with, like, society. It's legal in, medical marijuana is legal in the majority of states. Recreational marijuana is legal in a large minority. In cannabis, while you can go to jail in certain states, the penalties have been brought down so much. I know at one point the Border and Customs Patrol said that you can't go to jail for marijuana. I'm not sure if that's true or not anymore in the age of ice, but I mean, you would hope that they wouldn't you would allow people to have access to cannabis and such. And a completely different topic. Judge Rothenberg Center. I'm sorry, the Judge Rothenberg Center is scheduled to have, at least the FDA is scheduled to ban the GED, which is an electrical shock device that's used only at the Judge Rothenberg Center to work with behavioral students with severe autism and other disabilities. And right now, I'm going to give you what I have for the most recent update on this. There's a number of articles that prevail that say that the final rule. Okay, so in October of last year, the FDA said a guideline that it would shut down the use of the DRC apparatus by May of this year. And I'm looking at a update from Nancy Weiss, who's been doing this for over 30 years. I met her for the first time in 1995. So that tells you how long she's been fighting this. And she's been fighting this for probably a decade at that point. According to the FDA site, the proposal would reestablish a ban of electrical stimulation devices, ESDs, for self-injurious or aggressive behavior following the agency's now clarified authority to ban devices intended for human use for specific intended uses. So it is important to note that this is the cleanness on their agenda does not commit FDA to this action. In fact, the FDA first listed their intention to finalize this rule when they published a unified agenda at the end of December of 2024. At the time, they indicated that they plan to publish the final rule on the ban of electronic stimulation devices in October 25. While it is good news that the action continues to be listed in the agency's agenda, there has been a history of delays totaling numbers of years. While listing this for action this month is not committed, it still gives us some hope that the rule will eventually be enacted. This is second part's kind of crazy. It shows the amount of the amount of people that JRC serves. Now, JRC could not have anyone new receive the electrical stimulus ESD. They're limited to a class of people who already receive it and cannot be weaned off it. There's no real exact data, but I've heard somewhere around 50 to 70 people in various terms. So we don't know if those people have died, gotten better, gotten worse, whether they use more or less. There seems to be no real documentation publicly. Glenda Cooks, who is the current JRC executive director, was in a podcast titled Judge Rothenberg Center's on federal policy and specialized care. First aired on April 29th. The series called The Lobby Shop is sponsored by Bracewell. Bracewell is a lobbying group that describes themselves representing major research institutions, medical centers, hospitals, health systems, and healthcare providers on innovative and cost-effective ways of delivering healthcare services. That's a strange way of describing Judge Rothenberg Center, but apparently they say focus on clients' legal needs to allow them to do what they do best, treating patients and curing diseases. Cook says that in the podcast, JRC now serves 325 people and has 63 group homes. When JRC testified to the FDA in 2014, they said they served 241 people, housed in 40 group homes. Clearly, despite advocacy efforts, they are thriving. According to JRC's most recently published 994, they contract with Bracewell for lobbying. And there's some information here that shows that they have assets of revenue of $119 million in 2024, and that seems to be going up since 2011. Their assets total assets of $52.6 million. And there's a bunch of different groups or links to the supposed ban that's going to be going into effect this month, and hopefully it will be, but like this person has said before, things get kicked down the road often in this case, so unfortunately it sucks. And it really, additionally, and the people that are receiving those shocks can't really talk about the shocks. I can't describe them. They are largely nonverbal. They're being paid, their schooling is being paid for with taxpayers' money. And it's quite ridiculous how this is all being done. But yeah, it's ridiculous how JRC's been doing this for over 35, if not, I mean, I think it started in the 80s when the state of Massachusetts tried to sue them. I mean, this is like been going on for decades and decades and decades, with no clear, and every time, there's a win, I mean, JRC sued the FDA saying they have authority to do this, of all places, but so it's just crazy to see how long this has been going on for. It's also crazy to see somebody like Nancy Weiss be so completely committed to trying to stop this. And, Nancy's an incredible person. She does incredible work. You know that we're dealing with a company that makes hundreds of millions of dollars a year. They're not going to go down quickly. And it's sad because they're probably using the fact that they have the JRC, the ESDs, and they're the only place to actually probably, in their mind, they're probably using that to get the most disabled to go to their schools. I know for a fact that they do work with autism speaks. I know that when I've heard rumors that they actually had a possible booth in Maine trying to get patients, but I'm not sure. I can't confirm that. But I think I heard something about that a couple of years ago, possibly pre-COVID. I'm not even sure how long ago that was, but I hope that doesn't happen because it doesn't sound like. And I know people in Maine have worked hard to keep them from having students from Maine. I don't know the status of that. Unfortunately, privacy and all that does hurt this with that. Additionally, it's been a year since the Department of Education was rebranded to be basically collapsed, and and within that year, the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Ed has lost 90% of its workforce. They were fired. Most of them were lawyers, and of that, there was 30,000 pending complaints on everything from racial discrimination to disability discrimination to due process issues with IEPs, and federal rules. The Department of Ed has serious has a responsibility through IDEA and its amendments to have federal guidelines for the education of disabled children. Leaving it up to the states doesn't make it helpful for people who need guidance on this. And certainly best practices can be shown from state to state. And I mean, it just doesn't make sense to get rid of Department of Ed. So not only does that get rid of anything that helps with primary and secondary education, but post-secondary education, such as school loans, loans for public service people, loans for fire people, loans for nurses, loans for teachers, loan programs for people who work in nonprofits, are all being dismantled as a result of because there's nobody at the Department of Ed to even go through them. The Department of Ed is incredibly important in the everything going on in the world today, and it's kind of astounding that yes, and it's almost tragic that Donald Trump decides to cut the Department of Education. It just seems like a bad joke that you just don't want to make because it's just it's cutting off your nose to spite your face. It seems, and it's just, I mean, given what we've gone through in the past months with all the uncertainty, it's never going to change. I mean, we're not going to get Wendy McMahon, who I believe is the wife of who used to run the World Wrestling Federation, is now running the Department of Ed. It's like, I mean, you can't. It's like the clowns running the show, and that's really, literally kind of scary. with wars in Iran and everything. And it's not just, oil. I mean, other countries are telling people that they should worry about medication shortages, and certainly it makes sense given how expensive traveling is, how expensive oil is, how expensive everything is, and it's going to be for a long time because of this war. Yeah, it's kind of scary to begin with, to be honest with you. In our local political news, which is some of the most watched political news in the nation, the race between Susan Collins and her opponent has taken a bunch of turns. Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, who was recruited by Charles Schumer, the Democratic chair of the DSCC, to run against Susan Collins, has suspended her campaign. In late April, she just didn't have enough. She just basically suspended her campaign, which basically sets up primary between Graham Plattner and Susan Collins. There is a third candidate, David Costello, and there's a fourth candidate, Andrea Goodspeed, who was a write-in candidate. Plattner says he will not beat them, and is pivoting towards the fall in disability news. Susan Collins has been out this week, I believe it was, it's Friday, maybe Wednesday. She disclosed she has a essential tremor that she's developed. I think that's something that is close to what the girls, Emily Sarius just came out with some neurological condition that comes with aging. And it shouldn't affect her at all. If you look at videos, you can see it a little bit. And kudos to Susan for coming out and talking about it. Certainly having a disability is hard to disclose, and when she's in the public light as much as she is, it must be really difficult to have to do that. But then again, I'm sure people were making generalizations and stuff that probably weren't right. So I'm glad she got out there and told people what's going on with that, because it's important. And who knows how this election's going to go. We have gerrymandering and new Supreme Court rules last week with the Civil Rights Voting Act that seems to be kind of depressing and frustrating as all heck. It's just sad that, a year ago we had a functioning Department of Education, and now 18 of those programs have been transferred to 9 different agencies. And so much has been lost with layoffs that the educational and existential knowledge of what's needed for experience is gone. They were fired, and there's no intent to try and rehire them, and it's going to take a lot more than new. Even if we're lucky and can get a change in that, still, it's 3 years until then. We look at, how we gotta get that kind of institutional experience back. I mean, we need to have those types of federal offices and insights and stuff. One thing I didn't realize is that the Democrat Graham Plattner is considered 100% disabled by the Army. But yeah, he uses the R word, which I find kind of troubling. But I guess, if you're a progressive bro from, down in mid-coast, you can get away with that because, you have the right, the right people, and your family's rich or whatever, or well-to-do. But it is kind of troubling. And, I'm all for people living their best lives. I just really, sometimes there are things that make you cringe. That's definitely one of them. And I think we're done for right now because, honestly, it's just been a long week, been a long 2 weeks. But we survived. I survived. And I'll be back hopefully soon with another edition of this storytime hour, half hour, well, around a half hour. But we got a lot done. We talked about a lot of really important stuff, and we'll follow it up hopefully soon, hopefully next week. That's my plans. I want to be doing this more. I love doing this job. And feel free to comment, feel free to drop a like, and share, whatever. I really appreciate it. We've been doing this for over 6 years now. And it's great. It really does help. I may try and do Substack with this at some point. Right now, it's not, that's just don't have any energy in dealing with grief that is completely overwhelming. And I hope to feel better soon. I mean, it's hard. But thanks for listening, and hope to see you soon.